Okay, AP Stats, this is the last part of your Packet 5, and we are done with Unit 3, collecting data. Okay, so big note, we mentioned this briefly in the live session today. In the real world, we cannot ethically take a random sample of people and make them participate in a study involving drugs. We just can't do it. Imagine if you were randomly selected and you were forced to take a drug you didn't want to take. We cannot do it, for obvious reasons. There are more advanced methods for controlling for this type of selection bias. We call it selection bias because, remember, if we don't have a random sample, we can't generalize back to a population, and that leads to selection bias. When we rely on volunteers for testing new drugs and we see significant results, we need to be willing to assume that the volunteers are representative of the larger population. If not, we couldn't get anything done. Like, imagine the COVID vaccine testing. We had to rely on volunteers to take those vaccine drug trials, right? The FDA wouldn't be able to approve the new vaccines if we weren't willing to assume that volunteers are representative of the larger population. So that's just an assumption we have to make. We can also repeat the study on a different group of volunteers to see if we get the same results. So are there situations when experiments are not practical or ethical? Definitely. So you would evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. What would lead you to create an experiment in the first place? So in order to apply to actually start an experiment, you want to make sure that one of these things is applicable. So the association between the explanatory and response variable is strong, consistent. Larger values of the explanatory variable are associated with stronger responses, right? We want to make sure that our cause precedes the effect and that our cause is plausible. If we meet all of these things, then an experiment is warranted to do more research on the connection between those two variables. So we want to make sure that there's some sort of correlation before we even start an experiment, right? If we meet these 5 things, then we can say that our experiment is practical and we think we should explore this more. All right, basic data ethics. All planned studies must be reviewed in advance by an institutional review board charged with protecting the well-being and safety of the subjects, right? That's just common sense and oversight. All individuals who are subjects in a study must give their informed consent before the data is collected. This should make you think of the Tuskegee experiment that we discussed last class. Informed consent. The participants in that study were barely informed of anything. That's what made it extremely unethical, right? Even when there was a valid treatment for syphilis out there, it wasn't even offered to the subjects. So informed consent, when their data is collected, they need to know what's going on. All right, all individual data must be kept confidential. Only summaries for groups of subjects may be made public. So when results of an experiment are published, they don't say people's names in them or any identifying characteristics of them. They just give summaries, where they can say that overall this was the average result or this was the average proportion from this group. All right. So our vocabulary from up here with these data ethics, institutional review boards. The board's purpose is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects that are participating in research activities. The board will typically review the plan of study and they can require changes. Informed consent. Subjects must be informed in advance about the nature of the study, the specifics, and any potential risks identified with that. Confidentiality is not the same as anonymity, right? Confidentiality means we're a safeguard of people's personal information. So we need to keep that confidential and we need to keep that safeguarded. All right? So here's where I get your feedback on what you think is ethical or unethical with respect to these examples. So number 1, a promising new drug has been developed for treating cancer in humans. Before giving the drug to human subjects, the researchers want to administer the drug to animals to see if there are any potentially serious side effects. What are your thoughts on the ethical considerations of this study? All right, number 2. Are companies discriminating against some individuals in the hiring process? To find out, researchers prepare several equivalent resumes for fictitious job applicants, with the only difference being the gender of the applicant. They send the fake resumes to companies advertising positions and keep track of the number of male and female candidates that get contacted for interviews. Do you guys think that this is an ethically created experiment and that there's nothing wrong with this experiment? I would say that one major issue with respect to this experiment, one major issue would be that the fake resumes are being sent out to real job postings. So if our fake applicants actually got interviews, we could have pushed out someone who was actually applying for the position. So that's something to keep in mind ethically. All right, number 3, will people try to stop someone from driving drunk? A television news program hires an actor to play a drunk driver and uses a hidden camera to record the behavior of individuals who encounter the driver. What do you guys think about the ethical considerations here? There's definitely not informed consent for the participants, right? They see someone who's an actor hired to play a drunk driver, but they don't know that he's an actor. So they're not completely aware of everything going on in the experiment, and they were not informed prior to the experiment. So ethical considerations there. All right. Good luck on the test.